Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me again this morning on our next port, which is Laem, Chabang. And as you can see up there, I've got Pattaya and Bangkok, which means you have a couple of options in this port. So Laem, Chabang is obviously the gateway port for Bangkok, but you have two options here. So starting off Pattaya to the south of Pattaya, depending on how you want to pronounce it, to the south of Laem, Chabang, and you have the option of going all the way through to Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. Just like most Asian cities, Thailand is pretty much a sum of its parts, from the majestic Cameron Highlands to the beautiful offshore islands with their stunning beaches. And one of the country's most famous is Phi Phi Island, which was made famous by Leo DiCaprio's The Beach scene. And then you throw in the magnificent sunsets over the Gulf of Thailand and throw also into the mix the two of the top tourist cities of Bangkok and Pattaya, which are both on our itinerary. And you have a country that's got something for just about everybody. But as per most countries in Asia, religion plays a big part in the daily life of the Thai, being predominantly Buddhist. And it's a land of temples, there's no getting away from it. But Thailand in general and Bangkok is a land of temples, pagodas and Buddhas. And the phrase, you see one, see them all, doesn't really apply here. But as I always say, you don't have to try and see absolutely every Buddha or every temple in Thailand to get a feel for the country. And the size definitely does matter here. And as in this country here, because buildings keep getting bigger, or not only buildings, but things keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this statue of Buddha on the outskirts of Bangkok is a massive 6 stories high. And I'm guessing, you could probably see it from outer space, but you can certainly see it from almost every part of Bangkok itself. So despite the traffic chaos that is Bangkok, which is like Saigon on steroids, the city of Bangkok holds the title of being the world's most visited city by tourists. So a little bit of background to Thailand. Although little is known about Thailand before the 13th century, it can trace its roots around back to the 15th century when it was a small trading post in the kingdom of Ayutthaya. I think some of you are going there on an excursion out of Bangkok. But Ayutthaya was built on a piece of land surrounded by 3 rivers, strategically making it easier to defend from invaders from other countries. But despite the natural defenses of its location, the kingdom fell in 1767 to the invading Burmese. And they began setting fire to the city, totally destroying it. And for some reason known only to themselves, they went around chopping all the heads and hands and arms off the statues. And that's what they look like today. But a couple of years later, a military leader called Thaksin emerged, and he succeeded in expelling the Burmese from Thailand. And then he went on to be crowned as king, making him probably the first king of Thailand. He liked to be called Thaksin the Great, after his success in ridding the country of the Burmese. And so Thaksin the Great decided to relocate his capital from the destroyed city of Ayutthaya with its headless and armless statues and build a new capital on the west bank of the Chao Phraya River, which is central Bangkok. And he called this new capital Thonburi, and which is near the heart of today's touristy part of the city where he relocated this capital. And the stress and the strain and the pressure of living up to the name of Thaksin the Great eventually became too much, and it took its toll on him, and he began going a little bit strange before becoming a religious fanatic, believing himself to be Buddha. And he then, which you can imagine didn't go down too well with the Buddhist monks living around at the time, and any monks who refused to worship him as Buddha were flogged or simply sent to menial labor. Then Thaksin the Great went completely mad and had to be removed from power, and he was sentenced to death and executed in 1782. But despite all that, Thaksin is still regarded by many Thais as a sort of god and leader for the fact that he managed to expel the Burmese from the country. And whilst some even regard him, as I say, as a form of Buddha himself, nobody seems to dispute the fact that he did actually go completely mad. And there is even a festival held in his honor on the 28th of December each year that's called Crazy Taxon Day Festival. It celebrates not the fact that he went crazy, but the fact that his ascension to power and the fact that he rid the country of the Burmese. Anyhow, he was succeeded by the next king, who was Rama I, who had himself crowned in a rather lavish ceremony. And then the capital was moved once again, and he built the new capital on a sort of island in the bend in the Chao Phraya River, very similar to how Ayutthaya had been located. And he built it with the intention of emulating the splendor that had once been the original capital of Ayutthaya before it hadn't been devastated. Now, I don't know what it looked like in its heyday, but I'm pretty sure that he would be happy with how his dream has turned out when you see the splendor of the royal palaces and the pagodas and temples that are Bangkok's major drawcard for today. Now, Rama is the Thai name for king or majesty, and there have been many Ramas over the centuries, and I'm only going to mention a couple, and I'll leave the rest to Mark, who I know has a lecture this afternoon, and he may be touching on some of this. But I've just mentioned Rama the First. I'm going to mention Rama 4, 9, and 10, and I'll leave the rest to Mark. Or it could be the other way around, I can't remember. But here's Rama the Fourth. He ascended the throne of Siam in 1868, because that's what the country was called at the time. The name Siam is Sanskrit in origin, comes from the word Sioma, which means dark or brown, and it was in reference to the color of the skin of the locals. Whereas the name Siam is no longer applied to the country, it still exists in the dictionary, and we have the Siamese cat here. There we go. Now, Rama IV's claim to fame is that he was the first king of Siam, the time to have had a full Western education. And because he wanted his own children to have a similar Western education, he employed an English tutor called Anna Leonowens. And he brought her to his court as governess and tutor to his children. And apart from tutoring the king of Siam and its children, it appears that Anna also advised the king on Siam on relations with the West. And according to the legend or the musical, The King and I, Anna also introduced Rama IV to the pleasure of Western-style dancing as well. Outside Thailand, Rama IV is more famously known as Yul Brynner. And so I'm going to forward a little bit onwards. As we're all aware, on the 13th of October 2016, the world's longest-serving monarch at that point was 88-year-old King, and I'm not going to even try and pronounce his name, but he was Rama number 9, and he passed away. He died after a fairly long illness, but nevertheless, his passing plunged the country into a state of severe mourning, and a historic, record-breaking 12 million people filed past his body, lying in state in the funeral palace at the Royal Palace. And then the country went into a period of deep mourning that lasted for 12 months. And that meant that his somewhat flamboyant playboy son and heir apparent, Crown Prince of Thailand, was about to become the next king of Thailand. And up to that point, he had spent most of his time overseas, I think in Paris, doing what flamboyant playboy crown princes do, so to speak. And he is a most unusual character, and I know that Mark's going to touch a lot more on that this afternoon. But on the 1st of December 2016, on the 50th day after the king's death, he was officially invited by the government to ascend the throne as the 10th king, or Rama X, of the Chakra dynasty. But although banknotes had already been changed to replace his father's image, Rama X said he wasn't ready to ascend the throne quite yet, and he asked for more time to mourn his father's death before the coronation. Then 2 days before his coronation, he suddenly and controversially married his longtime partner. Just before the coronation took place, and he was crowned a Rama X, which effectively made his wife of just 2 days the new Queen of Thailand. Somewhat controversial over there. But it seems King Charles III, if you watch the coronation of Charles III back in UK, seems that he wasn't the only one having a problem getting his crown to sit on straight. And then Rama X was carried through the streets of Bangkok in full regalia, notably wearing a more comfortable hat. And all I can say to that is I'm so glad King Charles III opted to wear military uniform for his coronation, because the coronation outfit here is pretty out there. Now, I'm not going to touch much on this, but not until that long ago, Thailand was ruled as an absolute monarchy, meaning that Rama, or the king, absolute final say in everything. That changed and it became a constitutional monarchy, much like we have in the UK, where the king and queen is more a figurehead and doesn't actually determine anything at all. They are there to represent the crown. It wasn't that way up to that point. It is that way, and I know Mark is also going to touch on that this afternoon. But I'm only going to mention a couple of things here. There is a bit of a get-out card here for the king, because whilst Thailand may be a constitutional monarchy, there's a loophole, for want of a better word, in section 112 of the Thai criminal code called lèse-majesté, which in fact makes it illegal to defame, insult, criticize, or threaten, or say anything bad, or insulting about the king, the queen, the heir apparent, or any regent in any way, or there's a price to pay. And this is a bit of a controversial law in Thailand, and you can be imprisoned for an action that could be judged as falling under the lèse-majesté law here. So there's a bit of grumbling going on down at the coalface right now, and that's all I'm going to say about that for the time being. So folks, welcome to Thailand. On arrival, as I say, we arrive in Laem, Chabang, which is the main port for Bangkok, and it's also the gateway port to Pattaya. Now, Laem Chabang is a very busy working port. It's in an industrial area, similar to what it was yesterday, meaning there's nothing around the port area of any interest to tourists at all. So you have two options. You either go down from Laem Chabang, you either go down to Pattaya, which is about 45 minutes south of Laem Chabang, depending on traffic, and north to Bangkok, which is about 2 to 3 hour drives north of the port, depending on traffic. But we are in port overnight, and so you probably have the option to do both if you time it well. And I'm going to start with Pattaya because it's closer. So as I said, it's about 45 minutes, or just under an hour's drive, subject to traffic. And we found that out coming back on that shuttle bus I was on in Saigon, where we hit peak hour traffic coming back. Now, Pattaya began as a life way back as nothing more than just a sleepy little village. It was a bit of a backwater fishing village, which not too much going on at all. Until a guy called Nick Anad Wichrich, I think that's how you pronounce it, arrived on the scene, and he saw great potential in this sleepy little village. So he opened a couple of restaurants and bars, the result of which completely turned Pattaya on its head. Around this time, the Vietnam War was in full swing, with Pattaya becoming an R&R destination with American servicemen stationed nearby. And despite their short R&R stay, the troops there raved about the place, which is totally understandable for so many reasons. And the word passed around, it was spread around, that Pattaya suddenly became a hot alternative holiday destination to Bangkok. Particularly if you were looking for the party till you drop nightlife scene, and Pattaya doesn't disappoint in that respect. But at the other end of the spectrum, there are the retirees who flock here when Thailand immigration introduced a visa category for foreigners over 50. And word spread amongst the international baby boomers, and creating a fast-growing community of foreign retired baby boomers who were attracted by the great climate, the easy lifestyle, and the lower living costs. And I've got a couple of friends moved up from Sydney, living very happily up there in Pattaya. But in the past few years, Pattaya has been striving to upgrade and tidy up its image, and so advertising itself as a family-operated or family-orientated seaside destination offers something for the entire family, in addition to the retirees and the hardcore partygoers. But I'm saying they've definitely got their work cut out for them in this regard. Now, there's a street called Walking Street. It's a pedestrian street. That's where it's all happening, you could say. It's the main street of Pattaya. It's a very busy pedestrian street, full of shops, small restaurants, and so on. But when darkness falls, the Walking Street takes on a completely different persona, and it morphs into the party capital of Thailand. And this is definitely where it's all happening down there. But part of Pattaya's attraction to everybody is its beautiful beach strip that runs parallel to this walking street in the center of town. And the beach runs for about 3 kilometers, or about 2.5 miles, just over 2.5 miles. The beach strip is where you find the hardcore partygoers from the night before, recuperating for the rest of the day before they head out again to party all over again in the evening. But even Pattaya has its fair share of temples and pagodas. It's not all about Pari. So I'll mention a couple of them that are popular or well-known. The first one is Khao Phra Wat Temple. Wat means temple in Thai. This temple has its fair share of Buddhas that I already mentioned come in all shapes and sizes. If not, one Buddha fits all. And once you have photographed every single Buddha here, pop into the little temple house and check out the replica of Buddha's footprint. The key word being replica of a Buddha's footprint in here. That's believed what it is. Next one I'm going to mention is Wat Phra Ye. It stands on a hill just south of Pattaya. It's a good view from up here. And I also mentioned that Wat is a Thai word for pagoda. Now, for obvious reasons, Wat Phra Ye is known as the Big Buddha Temple, and referring to this enormous 18-meter high statue of Buddha. And as I say, bigging Buddha and temples bigger and bigger and bigger seems to be quite popular throughout the whole of Asia right now. Now, you already know by now, without me telling you, that there are going to be a lot of steps up to that temple. And these two seven-headed dragons down here, or serpents, are called Naga, N-A-G-A. That may not be the correct pronunciation, but for all intents and purposes, that's what it looks like. And according to mythology, Naga was a seven-headed cobra that protected Buddha whilst he was praying in a cave, seeking his state of enlightenment. It's revered in Thailand, this Naga, for being responsible for bringing rain, fertility, and prosperity to the region. But if Naga is provoked, he or she can turn nasty and just as easily bring on natural disasters like floods and drought. And this seven-headed Naga has become a symbol of Thailand, and you'll see versions of it throughout Thailand, particularly in temples. Now, at the top of those stairs I just showed you, there are several Buddha figures, all in different poses and postures, and these different poses represent Buddha's positions on a different day of the week in this particular temple here. In Thailand, there's special relevance placed on the day of the week that you were born on. So the idea is for you to figure out which Buddha represents your day of birth, and then you can pay some sort of homage to him if you so feel desired. About 20 minutes further south of Pattaya is the amazing structure called Laem Ratchawet, but it's more commonly known as just the Sanctuary of Truth. This was a brainchild idea of a Thai businessman who had an equal amount of dollars and time on his hands, and he went about building this structure. He decided to build the structure that is meant to represent or reflect a combination of the ancient vision of Earth, as well as an ancient knowledge and Eastern philosophy and whatever. And you may have noticed the similarity of some of these figures to the Cham sculptures that we saw back in Da Nang, the theme that runs through the whole of Asia here. It's full of contemporary and visionary art based on traditional religious themes and one thing or another. The whole temple and the structure are carved out of wood, mainly done or mostly done by a Burmese woman. And it's said to be still a work in progress, scheduled to be completed in the year 2050. And I'm not sure how much more they could actually cram into this building, because it's already 105 meters high and it covers an area of more than 2 rai, R-A-I. That's the standard of measurement in Thai. It means a house width. So this one is more than 2 rai, and it's quite spectacular, and it's a major attraction down here just outside Pattaya. Now, I've already mentioned that Pattaya is Thailand's party central, and I'm sure none of this appeals to anybody in this audience today, but there is another side to Pattaya. If you have decided to come here for the day and you're considering staying a while longer until the evening, there are some very popular seafood restaurants along here, along the beach side of that walking street. And it becomes quite, I don't know what the word is, wild, crazy, interesting, fun, just to be there in the evening. We are in port overnight, so it's an option to consider if you're down here, maybe check out some of these seafood restaurants. That's it for Pattaya. Much further afield than that now, as we're going to go to Bangkok itself, the capital of Thailand. Completely different feel about it from Pattaya. Now, Bangkok City is also known as the City of Angels, although most Westerners just know it simply as Bangkok. But in Thai language, this is the single word name for Bangkok. It is one word. And the children have to learn to sing this as a song. I guess some of the we do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I am not going to sing it for you, but this is the one word. Now, if we take that into the English, not translation, but turning the Thai hieroglyphics into English hieroglyphics, this is the one word name for Bangkok. If we take that one step further and we translate it into English, here is the one word name for the City of Angels, and I say it's a single word. And I'm not going to even try and read that because I can talk fast, but I don't think I can talk quite that fast. It is the longest word, it is in the Guinness Book of Records as being the longest place name for a single word in the world, and I'm not disputing that. But if in case there's any New Zealanders in the audience, I have to mention that there is one name in one New Zealand city that's almost as long as the Thai name, but folks, not quite. And then I don't want to upset anybody from Wales. There's also a name over there which is almost the same, but guys, I have to tell you, the one in Bangkok takes the cake. It's in the Guinness Book of Records. Bangkok's growth as a city has been rapid, and the city seems to have been grown or thrown together with very little actual urban planning, and it's certainly not built in any sort of grid structure. It's got a haphazard, rambling, crazy appearance to the city, and it sits on the river. It's sort of split in half by the river Chao Phraya that runs right through the middle of it. That is the city's major river, the Chao Phraya River, that Bangkok sits on either side of, and then it eventually flows out into the Gulf of Thailand. But before it flows out, it splits the city in half, as I just said to you. The touristy attractions are on one side of the river. The local areas where the locals live kind of are on the other side of the river. But it's one of your classic river cities with the locals' daily lives revolving around this river one way or another. The river gets pretty busy, both day and night, and it's like a marine equivalent of the traffic and motorbikes that we saw in Saigon. There's just watercraft going everywhere. It's fun to be on the river. There's all sorts of boats running around on the river, from the ferries crisscrossing, taking the locals from one side to the other. There's tourist boats running up and down the river. And this is a great way, I've done this as well as doing Bangkok on foot, but this is a great way to actually see the river, and you do go past a couple of the temples in comfort of that boat. The local boats here are called the long tails. It's these very narrow, long, thin boats, and you can hire them to take on a trip if you like, but the locals get around on them. They're called long tails because of the extended driving shaft. It looks like a long tail sticking out the back with a small, very dangerous propeller at the end of it. But the advantage of these long boats is they have a very shallow draft, and they can zip up and down the series of shallow canals that are called klongs in Thai that crisscross the city. And this is where the majority of the locals live, in these traditional houses built up on stilts along the banks of the klongs. But the shallow, muddy waters of the klongs are often choked, not often, always choked with vegetation and other stuff, just like we saw floating around in the river, Saigon. Particularly if you went to the Mekong, you would have seen this en masse down there. And more so, the dead fish belly up gives you a clue as to the health of the water in these klongs, which is polluted from locals simply throwing all sorts of household waste into it. Nobody seems to bother too much. It doesn't bear thinking about what the diseases these kids could pick up, or maybe they're just so immune to it, they have the ultimate immunity system. But if you are taking one of those, you never know what's living in the rivers. If you are taking one of these trips on your own, which is nice to do, it's a great way of seeing the local side of town, I would refrain from resisting the urge to trailing my fingers graciously through the water, because you just never know what's swimming around in those klongs. Now, the klongs or the canals are on the Thonburi side of the river, the non-touristy side of the river. Bangkok is a very spread out city. It doesn't really have a single central area, although the bit where the tourist attractions are for the Royal Palace or whatever on Ratanakosin Island is what you probably would call the heart of the city. It's where the main attractions are for tourists. And you can understand why the island was chosen location back in the day to build a new capital, because of the protection the river gives it on at least three sides. It's the klongs on one side kind of form and the river on the other side turned it into a sort of an island which they felt was easier to defend at the time. The purple section here of the island is known as Royal City, And it's a collection of lavishly decorated palaces and temples. There's about 200, it covers about 200,000 square meters here, all protected by the palace perimeter walls that stretch around the whole complex for a couple of kilometers. Now, as I mentioned, the royal palace was built by Rama I, and it became the official residence of all Thai Ramas or kings up until 1949. They don't live there per se at the moment. The royal palace isn't a single building. It's a complex of buildings that will take your breath away. The whole complex of the royal palace is considered to be the most beautiful example of the ancient royal Siamese court. It's just exquisite architecture that has stood the test of time, and there's no argument from me there as you're walking around here. The complex was originally built in about 3 areas. The outer court near the entrance would have been with the government departments and one thing and another, and then the civil administration and so on. But in the corner of the outer court is where you'll find the temple of the Emerald Buddha. And that is one of the most important temples here, so I'm going to start with that. The proper name of the temple of the Emerald Buddha is Wat Pra Kau, but the temple is just called the Emerald Buddha Temple for short. It's much easier to remember. It's regarded as the most important Buddhist temple in the whole of Thailand. And the Emerald Buddha itself was carved from a single block of emerald jade back in the 15th century, which worth today would probably bring tears to your eyes. The Emerald Buddha is up on a series of platforms or steps, but no one other than the Rama is allowed anywhere near the actual Buddha itself. You can see it from down below. He comes here 3 times a year to perform the important ritual of changing the robes covering the Buddha. This is to bring good luck to the country during each new season. It's the same Buddha, just 3 different outfits he's wearing up there. The Temple of the Emerald Buddha is also Thailand's most sacred site. There's a very strict dress code here and in every part of this royal palace, and I'll mention that just towards the end of my lecture. Between the Temple of the Emerald Buddha and the ticket office, there's a small museum that's usually overlooked by most tourists because they don't know it's there. But I'm just going to give mention to it in case you're interested. It's called the, just bring that one back one. There we go, that one there. Okay. It's the majority of tourists don't know it's here, so they go past it, or they're simply not interested, but you might be. It's called the Pavilion of Regalia, Royal Decorations and Coins. And it's a small museum with a big title, but it houses exactly what the title says. It houses the royal regalia, medallions, and jewels. And it may be of interest to you, it may not. It's usually overlooked, but it's there if that appeals to you. The actual Grand Palace itself is a bit of fusion of European and Thai architecture. Whilst the building itself may be unmistakably European in design, the roof is unmistakably Thai in design with its turrets. Now, the interior reception room is still used for royal ceremonies and state occasions, but it's not open to the general public, by invitation only. I certainly don't have my invitation for the day that we're there. But the Dusit Mahaprasit, or the funeral palace, that you could call it, is regarded as the most elegant building in the entire court. You can't get into this one either, but it's used for the lying in state of kings, queens, and favoured members of the royal family when they pass on. And this is where Rama IX's body lay in state. The architecture of every temple in this complex is simply exquisite. And you take the time and just stand up next to it. You don't actually have to go into these temples to appreciate the beauty of this place. The temples or the outside is covered usually with gilt, multicolored glass mosaics. And I say just enough to stand there and take pictures and just marvel at the expense that's here. Now, Bangkok is a city of wats or temples and pagodas, many of them along the river just outside the palace walls, and I'll mention a couple of them that are of more popular or of more interested tourists, starting with Wat Arun, that's this one. It's the Temple of Dawn, lots of steps, no railings. Despite being called the Temple of Dawn, it's pretty cool at sunset as well, and quite often, and if you're going on a boat tour, you'll come past this one. It's a pretty energetic walk up to the top of these steps. And I passed on that option the day I was here. It was about 110 degrees in the shade. And I'm sure that I have already achieved my enlightenment from the number of steps I've already walked up throughout the whole of Asia. But it's there, and it's included on some of the tours, and you can walk up to the top. You'll also see it if you're just on a boat tour passing by on the river. It's quite a spectacular one, that. Now, I take millions of photographs everywhere I go. But nearly every time I come to Bangkok, well, not early, every time I come to Bangkok, I end up taking zillions and zillions of photographs. It's just so hard not to keep taking photographs of the splendor of these temples. Every wat is more beautiful and more breathtaking than the one before. And the expense that has gone into building these wats and palaces is simply mind-blowing, considering they're not used as residences anymore. And it's interesting considering the poverty level of the locals living down at the coalface of Bangkok. There's these wonderful temples that have cost zillions, golden Buddhas and whatever. Doesn't really do much for the locals living down at the coalface who are still living in a state of relative poverty here. But outside that temple, there was a pretty good little market for the times I've been there. Good collection of Thai souvenirs, reasonably priced. I just had to be fast to find something to take back to that neighbor who's been looking after my cat, or had been at the time. But, that's just outside that one. The next one I'll mention is Wat Tremet, the second temple I'm going to mention here. It's also called the Temple of the Golden Buddha. And there's no guessing why it's called the Temple of the Golden Buddha. This one's quite big. It weighs about 5.5 tons. And there's a bit of an interesting story about this one. When the Burmese were invading Bangkok, the statue was covered in plaster, and it was hidden away to protect it. And then it was forgotten about. It lay forgotten for decades until, for some reason or by mistake, it was rediscovered in the 1950s and restored to its former glory and put back on display again. Wat Pro is Bangkok's old temple, and it's hard to resist using adjectives here are amazing, breathtaking, and beautiful. But really, simply, that's what the only way to describe this place. Wat Pho is home to the massive reclining Golden Buddha. This one's lying down. It's 150 feet long and 49 feet high, and it's covered in small, thin leaves of real gold. This is not gold paint, this is gold, and these are constantly being replaced. Very large feet, which indicates he would have worn very big sandals, I'm assuming. But it's very hard to get a good picture here because of that narrow viewing area between you and that wall. So you've got to sort of jiggle around a little bit to get the whole statue in, or put on some sort of fisheye lens on your camera. But it is quite stunning here, especially when you're standing up next to it and appreciate the size of this, given that it's covered in gold leaf. And as if that wasn't enough, there's quite a lot more to this temple. There's something like 1,000 small Buddhas inside, and they say a lot easier to photograph than the actual reclining Buddha himself. But by this time, I was pretty much Buddha'd out. And yes, they were all beginning to look the same to me. So I stopped taking pictures of Buddhas. I'd have millions in any case. Now here's something a little bit different. Still at the palace area, Wat Pro has a resident traditional massage school that offers Thai massage to the general public. So if you're doing this independently and you have some time on your hands, you can find this on their website too. You might be able to fit in a relaxing massage between photographing Buddhas. But it's important to note that you don't take your clothes off for traditional Thai massage. It's hard to tell here which one is actually giving or having the massage in this photograph here. But it does say in their website you should wear something loose-fitting and comfortable. And if you're having a body massage, and if you don't, they are going to hand you or offer you to wear a pair of Thai-style loose fisherman pants to change into to give you privacy. But that's as far as the privacy goes here, because like anywhere in Asia, space is of a premium, and it can get pretty crowded in here. And I've had massage in here, and you're bang up against the person next to you, but close your eyes and try and relax. It's quite a fun experience. This is something a little bit left of field because it's not really on many tourist destinations, which is a bit of a pity, historically speaking. It's the City Pillar Shrine. It's the most sacred and significant site in the whole of Bangkok. Traditionally, it's the first building built in any new city in Thailand. And this one even supersedes building of the Grand Palace itself. It's built as a shrine or home to Phra Laem, I think that's how it's pronounced, guardian spirit or deity who is going to protect the city. And the temple also houses the very sacred pillars, the first stakes driven into the soil to establish the new capital itself. There's a lot of history here. It was one of the first places the newly crowned Rama X and his queen visited following his coronation. I'm just going to mention this building here. If you're driving through, there's something different. You see if you're going on one of the tours, you may drive past the Democracy Monument. It stands pretty much in what you might consider the center of Bangkok, more or less. It was commissioned in 1939 to commemorate the Siamese Revolution that Mark is going to talk this afternoon in his lecture. This is the reason it was built. It was an unpopular monument because it sits in the middle of this massive traffic roundabout. Unpopular to the locals because not only were hundreds of shady trees cut down to make way for it to be built, but the residents and the shopkeepers who were living and working in the area were given 60 days' notice to move out, so that the road could be widened to create a ceremonial boulevard leading to the monument. Well, the intention was good to celebrate the revolution. To put it in place, it wasn't so popular with the locals. But as I say, Mark's going to mention this afternoon, this revolution that took place. It's a very complex design building intended to symbolize the new westernized Bangkok. And every square inch of this monument has significance relating to that revolution. There's not a single brick that doesn't represent something, either what it is or the way it's facing or whatever. The centerpiece is meant to represent a palm leaf manuscript box holding the Thai Constitution of 1932. And at the bottom here's Naga again, although this time he's just got one head, not the 8 that you usually see. And now to one of my favorite attractions in Bangkok, the Royal Barges National Museum. It houses the king's private collection of his beautiful golden river boats or barges that are only used during major events for getting around the city. Well, if you go back in the day, it's the only way the king used to get around. Now they're housed in the museum, and they're only taken out of storage to celebrate major events, one of which was the king's recent coronation. And if you watched it on TV, you would have seen this procession of magnificent barges up and down the river. I was here a couple of weeks before the actual coronation took place a few years ago, and I was on a tour that was heading for this barge museum, and then the local Thai gunboats came out and chased us away because they were taking the boats out to do a practice rehearsal for the event. And by looking at this, I think they needed quite a lot of practice there to get it up and running, but these boats are actually quite spectacular in themselves, the workmanship on them. Again, there's the seven-headed Nagra, takes place of pride on one of the king's own barges. It is hard to describe this thing without saying spectacular and beautiful. If this sort of thing appeals to you and you're there doing it on your own and you can fit it in, it's worth having a look at. You can only get there by boat because the barges are housed in a sort of dry dock area which keeps them on the canal, which there's water, obviously, and they're ready for semi-floating for in and out. So it goes without saying that because it's floating, it affects the angle of the gangway here. But the only way to get to this museum is by a boat. So find a tour that's taking you there. The Prasad Museum is a private museum that houses what is said to be one of the most spectacular private art collections in Asia. It was built by and owned by a Mr. Prasad, a wealthy real estate businessman. And his intention was to build a dream of a museum full of Thai Asian treasures. And it's all designed to promote the architecture excellence of the past. It's quite a spectacular place here. If you're looking for something different, classical setting of his personal priceless collections of art. It is simply stunning Thai furniture. Good idea of what a typical Thai house would have looked like back in the day. I quite like this style of furniture. There's an area of the garden called the Garden of Serenity, so it's full of pathways, tranquil pools, and priceless statues, and he's even got his own Buddha out there as well. This one is an interesting one. The next house I'm going to mention too is called the Home of Jim Thompson. whether that name rings a bell. He was an American adventurer who relocated to Thailand in the mid-1940s. To describe him as a bit of an entrepreneur is an understatement. It doesn't go anywhere near describing what he was or who he was. He had a complicated past. He'd worked as a prominent architect in New York City, before serving as an operative in the Office of Strategic Services, ACA. I think it's a central CIA. Apart from that, he was an avid art collector, all of which is displayed in this home. But he's most remembered in Bangkok for his part in revitalizing the ailing Thai silk industry. And he pretty much single-handedly saved the silk industry from extinction that was going rapidly downhill. Then after living in Bangkok in this beautiful house for a few years, he simply disappeared after going for a walk from his friend's place where he was staying in the Cameron Highlands. His search to locate him is one of the largest land searches in Southeast Asian history. Lots of conspiracy theories as to what happened to him, but his disappearance remains unsolved mysteries in this region. His home has been turned into a museum, and it's like a time capsule that remains the way it was the day that he disappeared. And he built his home right opposite where the weavers lived, in the design of a typical style of house of the day. You can find Jim Thompson's silk items, much sought after throughout, and duty-free shops particularly, and in shops throughout Thailand. So this is the story behind that one. Now, I don't talk a lot about shopping, and I think the translation went horribly wrong in this one here. But what I think it's trying to say is this. People who say you can't buy you happiness just don't know where to shop. And us ladies know that is the fact. Now, Bangkok has some of the biggest and most unbelievable shopping malls, and I'm not going to mention every single one of them. This is just an example. And then the other end of the are the street markets that pop up all over the city. Flick it on. But the daddy of all Bangkok's markets is the Chatuchak weekend market, and we are here on Saturday and Sunday, if I read it correctly. It's massive. It's almost like a small city in itself, which is why it's billed as being the world's biggest market. And having spent hours walking through this, there's no argument for me on that score there. It now has a very, if you're going there, get yourself a map, which they give out to you, because it's very well marked, so you can through these stalls. It's color-coded as to what area sells what. Like I think the yellow area is teen fashion, not on my list. The purple section is art and paintings, and it's most definitely on my partner's list over there. It's very easy to go down, just get yourself a map, and the stalls are also marked. It's a bit like the market, like Bentan Market, easier than Bentan Market, because you can cross-reference where it is you're trying to go. And it is very big. And if you walk past this clock, you'll know it's like being in a maze. You will have reached the center of this market. But as I say, it's a popular market, gets very, very crowded. And like most crowded locations, keep your wallet and your bags and that. Just be aware of where your items are. Full of clothing, something for everybody in this market. I'd hate to be having to take stock here. You would just never end. There's if you're real thrill seekers amongst us, there's a food section selling traditional street food here. It's open Saturdays and Sundays from 9 o'clock until about 6 o'clock, and so we are overnight. There's also going to be, I'm pretty sure, a little market on the wharf, similar to what there was yesterday, and where we set up. Now, getting around Bangkok, if you're on an organized tour, then that's an easy way of getting around Bangkok. But the Bangkok road system is horribly inadequate for the amount of traffic using it, and I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. So elevated roads have been built to try and alleviate some of the ever-increasing traffic chaos. These elevated routes sort of divide the traffic up by having traffic move around on different tiers, which is a fairly good idea. Creates a sort of yet effective elevated expressway network that bypasses lots of areas. It also has a subway system, which the locals are encouraged to use, but it's not much use to tourists, really. And there's a sky train, this elevated train rail network that also travels above the city. Again, it doesn't really go to any of the tourist areas, and it's going to take you longer to figure it out. It's not really worth it at the end of the day. I have used this, but really it's such a pain because it doesn't take you to where you want to go, and then you've got to figure out how to buy a ticket and whatever. If you're on the ship's tour, then getting to where you're going is going to be much easier. It's a driver's problem. You just need to sit back, relax, and watch the craziness going on around you. If you're taking a private tour on one of the limousines, then you've got it made as well. You just tell the guy where you want to go. My suggestion, if you're not on a tour and you're not got a private tour, is consider taking the Bangkok on your own transfer from Laem, Chabang to Bangkok. That gets rid of the first option of having to figure out how you're going to get there and do all sorts of deal with taxi drivers. That is going to take you, according to the ship, it's going to take you to the Central World Plaza shopping centre, one of these major shopping centres in Bangkok. To get from there to where the Royal Palace is, for example, it's going to be about 20 minutes, depending on traffic. And if you're going on that transfer, then you've got to figure out how you're going to go from there to wherever else you want to be going to. And your options are a taxi or one of these. Taxis still have to cope with the traffic. This is the way I usually go. It's the quickest way to get around via these small motorized golf buggy type of things. They are also called tuk-tuks. They're not the most comfortable of vehicles, I got to tell you that. And they run on petrol, which you will become very aware of after you've been in it for about 10 minutes. But the drivers are fearless. And they are very good at zipping in and out and around traffic jams, and you'll get to where you're going much quicker. Just close your eyes if you're not so sure about it. Your options are taxis or these. These seem to be a bit more versatile in getting you through the city. Just be careful you don't get ripped off with them. You've got to haggle hard. I got to tell you, if it's any consolation to you, Graham and I got ripped off in the taxi in Saigon, the first taxi we took, and I thought I was a pretty savvy traveller, but we got ripped off. So you need to just make sure you haggle really hard before you get into this so that there's not an altercation when you get to the other end. So if none of that appealed to you, here's an option. If you're thinking of going down to Pattaya, and you're going to be there for the evening, this is Tiffany's show. It's billed as being a spectacular, world-class show. Everything about Tiffany's at Pattaya, in this place here, is extravagance, from the theatre building itself to the costumes, the lighting, and the actual show itself. Part of the show tells Siam's history through graceful Thai dances, but these Thai dancers are ladyboys. These are not women, they are beautiful looking, what is referred to as lady boys. Now, they are performers and artists. They are not regarded as cross-dressers or by any means at all. It's quite an elegant professional show, and I'm just going to put this up. It's open every day in case anybody's interested in taking in that show at night. Now, I'm on the home run here. The currency here is the Thai baht. It's already got the new king's face on it, Rama the 10th. You never know with money exchanges whether they're going to turn up at the port here or not. Sometimes yes, sometimes not, but I put that up in case they do. There's some pretty strict temple etiquette rules and photography rules in that Royal Palace complex. You only can take video in the ground areas, outside the temple areas itself. You cannot take any photographs inside the buildings, so just be aware of that, and includes your cameras as well. You can take plenty of photographs outside, but in most of the areas, with the exception of a couple, it will tell you anyhow. If there's a sign there saying no photography, then it's no photography. There are some pretty strict rules when it comes to dress code and entering the temples in Bangkok. There's lots of things you cannot do. And you'll see signs outside, but pretty much goes like this. For as pleasing as this may be on the eye for some of us, you won't get into any temple looking like this. And ladies, if this is all you packed to come on the trip, you won't get in either. So the idea, and you certainly won't get in if you have any beer, similar. The idea is if you have one of those wraps, just throw it into your bag, and you can always throw it around you as you get to the entrance door. Again, like all temples, you'll need to take your shoes off, and I've never seen them neatly placed like that, to be honest. So the unwritten rule is if you're going to leave a pair of gritty sneakers outside, those are the ones you need to pick up on the way out. You don't pick up a better pair and leave your horrible shoes behind you. That's the rule of thumb. And we call these thongs in Australia, or jangles, or whatever you call them. if you're wearing these, you have to take all shoes off. And the problem is you don't wear socks with these generally. And here's the kicker. There's no bare feet in the temple. So if you're going to be wearing open sandals or these thongs without socks, you will not get into the temple. So the idea is you put a pair of socks in your bag. It's not a good look, I admit. Put a pair of socks in your bag. That's an even worse look. But when you take the sandals off, you've got socks on and you will be allowed through the temple. There's a word about tattoos, especially tattoos of Buddha. Buddha is not for decoration, as the sign says here, and lots of tourists decide to get Buddha tattoos. They take it as an insult. So if you've got something like this on you, or you're thinking of getting something like this on you, you will need to cover it up. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention, and this is from the Thai Tourist Board. These foot spas were very popular in Asia, throughout the whole of Asia. You sat at a tank, put your feet in the tank, and I've already done this, and these fish would nibble away at the dead skin on your feet. The amount of fish congregating around your feet is indicative of how much work they needed to do there. And for very severe cases, it might be they may have had to call in the big guns to do it. But the point I'm bringing to your attention is that the Tourist Information Board is strongly suggesting you don't do this because of the real risk of catching some infection, including HIV, hepatitis, or some other horrible stuff as well. You don't see them around so much, but they used to be all over the place. And so, ladies, I made it on time this time. So thank you very much for joining me this morning. I hope you have a great day in Bangkok. Thank you and good morning.